Good evening. Let's call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque's June 11th, 2024 meeting to order. Let's start with roll call. Oh, the time is 6:01, 6:02? 6:01. Excellent. So, Commissioner Barrow?
Here.
Commissioner Martinez?
Here.
Commissioner Edward?
You're kind of right in the middle of a drink.
I'm so sorry. I didn't look up at the, believe me, I didn't plan it that way. Commissioner Baldwin?
Present.
There, she's up. Commissioner Paglia Petra? Okay, got it again. Commissioner Haywood?
Yeah.
And Commissioner Homan here. Excellent. So we have the agenda before us. Can I hear approval of the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Great. So let's move forward. We'll go on to the public comment period. Residents may address the Planning and Zoning Commission to comment on issues, problems, or successes on topics that do not appear elsewhere on the agenda. Audience members will be given an opportunity to comment on the agenda items as they come up. Speakers must register with the village staff prior to the beginning of the meeting. There should be sign-up sheets available. If you haven't had an opportunity, please come up and do so, okay? Thank you. Okay. Is there anybody, let's see, Camille? Ms. Varos, would you please come to the podium, give your name and address? Oh, you've got, what are we doing, 2 minutes now or 3?
It's up to you guys.
Okay. It's a light agenda tonight, so we'll give you up to 3
Good
minutes.
evening, commissioners and residential people. Camille Fados, 427 El Paraíso Road, Los Ranchos, New Mexico. And good evening. I just want to recognize Joe Craig, our mayor, and you know, he didn't even have an opportunity for a chance to show what he was going to do for us. But as the president of Friends of the Village, I think he did a lot. And we have history. You know, he knows that I didn't support him, but I respect him as our mayor. And in fact, I hope that we can have a memorial for him and respect the family at the same time. Is that possible? I have no idea, but I think we can do that. Anyway, you know, sometimes I get behind in reading the Vision magazines, but I was reading the last 2 editions, and I'm just going to encourage those articles that have been approved, and I don't know who does that, that one in particular article was about ditching and irrigation. Well, in this village, we have what's considered acequias. So either use /acequias, you know, if ditches or irrigations are going to be recognized or outlined. I would appreciate the word acequia be included because that's part of our history. And if we have a so-called historical society, they should be looking at situations like this. Moving on, I just want to recognize, I think it was Albuquerque Asphalt or who's doing the road improvements in our neighborhood of El Paraíso. Even though, having a road totally changed could create havoc or inconvenience. But the thing of it is, they're respectful, and like today, they did the first surfacing of asphalt, which looks beautiful, and they would like to think that the road's not going to be used until they finish, but that's not possible. We have to either get to work or appointments or something. And so I did ask them, what route, so that they're not going to be interrupted as much, what route I can go and be respectful
The
to
speaker's
them.
time has expired.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Faros.
You're welcome.
Are there any other speakers, anybody else that would like to speak that didn't have an opportunity to sign up? Seeing and hearing none, we'll continue with our agenda. Next up is our consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I move we accept the consent agenda.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
That was an aye, not an opposed.
Excuse me?
Sorry, late on the mute button. I was saying aye, but I said aye just as you said any opposition. I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstood. I totally support the consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Baldwin. All right, let's go on. Sorry, let me get to the right spot. Okay, we're on to section 4, our public hearings. Our first item is a variance request 2308. It's returning from last year. It's a request by Christopher Houghton, agent for John Moser, for a variance from subsection 9.2.10 E2A, requiring a 10-foot side yard setback distance to allow an addition to an existing single-family dwelling to be just 5 feet 1/2 inch from the side property line. The property is located at 415 Pueblo Solano Road, Northwest, here in Los Ranchos, 87107, and is legally described as Lot 5, Pueblo Solano Addition. All of Lot 5 excluding the west 50 feet. The property contains 0.5969 acres more or less. Mr. Chappell? Yes. All of those, I'm sorry, I don't have the regular write-up, and I'm going right off the agenda. My apologies for not doing it. Anybody that's, go ahead.
Yeah, anyone is going to testify on this particular matter, if they would stand and raise their right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell nothing, the whole truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of law? I do. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Williams, will you give us a staff report, please?
Madam Chair, thank you. Yes, I will. Commissioners, good evening. My name is Brennan Williams. I am serving as Planning and Zoning Support Staff and will present this item as well as the next item on the agenda tonight. Madam Chair, you are correct. This matter has been before the Planning and Zoning Commission before. That was back in January at your regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning meeting. At that time, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 7-0 to deny the request. The applicant subsequently filed an appeal. That matter went to the Board of Trustees. At the Board of Trustees, the applicant, the appellant at that point, referenced some sections of the non-conformance standards of the village zoning code. The Board of Trustees felt that that evidence, that new evidence was pertinent to the request and subsequently remanded this matter back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their consideration of that new evidence. Before I go any further, I do want to correct a typo that's in the staff report. This would be on page 1 of 5, the second paragraph. At the very end of the last sentence, it references a section of the zoning code, specifically section 9.9.23E, nonconforming uses and structures. It looks like that was fat-fingered. The section should be 9.2.23, again, just for the commission's clarification and anybody that's following along. As I mentioned, commissioners, this matter came back to you with two arguments. One from the appellant indicating that the boxing in of the existing area that's within the setback does not expand the degree of nonconformity, and two, that based on the standards of section 9.2.23E1B and a letter of support from the adjacent neighbor, the variance request should be granted and that the decision should be overturned. The previous decision to deny the request should be overturned. In reviewing those particular standards of the code against the evidence that's been presented, staff has changed their initial recommendation, which was for denial back when this matter was before you back in January, to a recommendation of approval. Those findings are out and conditions are outlined on pages 3 and 4 of your staff report. Again, I appreciate the flexibility of the commission, but if we get to a point where we start talking about possibly accepting the recommendation of staff, there are just a few tweaks that I'd like to propose to the commission to what I feel better addresses the issue than those that are addressed in the staff report. Not significant changes, it's essentially deleting certain sections of those findings, but again, I just want to put a pin in that, that when we get to that point, if the commission wants to consider the recommendation of staff, that I be afforded an opportunity just to explain the changes that we're proposing with the commission's approval.
Mr. Williams, do you think it would be valuable for you to express those to the commission at this time so that we can take them into our consideration as we're hearing the applicant and any other witnesses?
Madam Chair, if that's the
Please.
pleasure of the commission, I'll be more than happy to do that. Again, these are standards, and I've got copies here if folks want to get their hands on it and look at it directly, but essentially it would be on page, thank you. On page 4 of your staff report, item 2C, or excuse me, finding 2C
I'll give one to Mary.
ends that sentence with a reference to section 9.2.25E7A3. Then the following lines until the reference section in finding number 3 would all be deleted. And item number 4, as listed in your staff report, would become number 3. Essentially, the hardship criteria in item number 5 is the specific issue that we're addressing, and support staff believes that with the deletion of those items which reference specific variance criteria, it just makes it for a cleaner finding. And we'll certainly stand for questions if you have questions about that. The items that the papers, the documents that were passed out to you show the existing language, show the proposed language, and then there's a red line version there to show you what we're proposing to delete. Right before the meeting started, I did have a chance to meet with both the applicant and the agent, provided them with a copy and gave them a brief explanation of my explanation of what I was going to propose to you.
Okay. May I suggest to my fellow commissioners that we just take a brief moment to go over this each individually. We don't need to read it out loud. And if during our discussion, if it comes that way when we make a motion, if whoever is making the motion would like to include these as opposed to whatever the conditions and findings you wish to include in our decision tonight, let us read it into the record so that there is no confusion on what we're including, please. Okay, we will go forward. Will the applicant please come to the podium? If you'll give us your name and address, please, who you're representing, whatever.
Yes, ma'am. I'm representing the applicant, John Mosier. My name is Christopher Houghton, and I'm his attorney in this case. And so commissioners, Commissioner Martinez, Barrow, Holman, Tagliapietro, is it right? Tagliapietro, okay. Edward and Haywood.
I'll go with Drew. It's okay.
All right. Or maybe I'll just call you ma'am. So let me just give you a brief intro and roadmap and tell you what I hope to present and see if that helps orient us. So John Mosier, you saw stand up and swear to tell the truth. He's going to give a statement later, and then David Montoya is also going to give a statement in support later as well. Let me just explain why we're here. I know that the commission heard this back in January, I believe it was. And at that time, there was another agent here who was a contractor for Mr. Mosier. Mr. Mosier was out of the country, and I think there was a lot of miscommunication about what was being proposed. And this, in interchange, this format is pretty intimidating for normal folks, and I think the contractor had not been in this type of situation before and maybe couldn't explain what Mr. Mosier was proposing. So on appeal, explained, more of the evidence that we'd like to present and identified a part of the code that nobody had brought up at the first instance in front of the commission, which is a whole section that Mr. Williams brought up, 9.2.23, non-conforming uses and structures. And that essentially is the grandfathering in part of the code, which is relevant to this case. So we presented that to the board, and the board said, we'd like to give the commission, what you're saying makes sense, but we'd like to give the commission the first chance to decide this. And so here we are back here. The two pieces of I guess there's new evidence, which are basically just pictures. And I know Commissioner Edward had talked about going out there and looking at the property. We submitted a picture, I think it's in attachment 5, and it's page 5. And if, Darnell, if you could throw up yes, that's perfect. So this you have in your packet under attachment 5, page 5. This is in the record. This is a shot of the back of the building. And so this is the northeast corner of this building. And this building sits on the north side of Pueblo Solano, which is right near 4th Street, kind of north of Dan's Boots and Saddles. So this is the backside that you don't see when you're driving on Pueblo Solano. And if you see that little cutout there of the building, and I should mention this building was built in 1934, so it predated all of the codes. And so they had, for whatever reason at that time, left out that corner. The existing roof line you can see goes over the whole place, and you can see more or less where the property line is there, right there, that fence. And you also see a concrete slab that's already on the part of the build. And so Mr. Mosier, in buying this property and trying to rehabilitate this property, because it was a pretty distressed property, wants to complete that corner, go no further than the existing slab, go no further than the existing roof line, and then build huge windows on the backside to kind of capture the backyard, which is a pretty big backyard, and it has water rights and ditch access. And so he's going to beautify that part. That section of the house is the kitchen. And so he's just going to extend, the proposal is to extend the kitchen, have some big windows, and let in all the plants that he's going to grow back there. The deck, so I guess I should stop there. One of the factual clarifications, and this is in the report, one of the miscommunications here, is that what was believed to be proposed was something like a 150-foot square foot addition. And you can see that's not a 150-foot square foot addition. That's about 5 foot by 8 foot, so it's about 45 square feet that completes that. I think they were looking at, the room inside that house, but that room would be about 150-foot square foot once you pop that corner out. But the corner is really just a 45-foot corner that gets popped out there. The other miscommunication was that there was something like a 500 square foot deck being proposed. All that's being proposed, if you see that little concrete raised part that goes under the door, it's about a foot up from the slab. All that's being proposed there is to put decking material so that you walk straight out onto the deck. So it's not a structure really that's being built. It's just gonna be wood on top of that slab in place so that it looks nicer. So that's all that's being proposed. And then on the legal side, where I think everyone got off on the wrong foot is believing this to be a variance from existing code under 9.2.25. And that makes sense if you're building a new building, because if you're building a new building, you have to conform with all the code. If you're making a modification like this to a really old building that predated the code, there's a provision for that in 9.2.23. And I'll point you to it, and I know you don't have the code there in front of you, but under 9.2.23, and one of the there's a purpose statement there, which is to give relief to these old buildings. And so right up front in that section, it's clear the purpose is to work with properties that were built before the code and now don't conform because of later enactments. But section C of 9.2.23 addresses non-conforming structures, specifically buildings. And it says there that you can continue having a building that doesn't conform, and you can also enlarge, add additions or alterations, so long as they don't increase the degree of nonconformity. So in the report, the former director, Ms. Rubin, responded to that argument by the applicants that this doesn't increase the degree of nonconformity. Certainly it increases a little of the house footprint, I guess. So the inside of the house will be 45 square feet bigger, but the degree of nonconformity is what's important. So what is this building not conforming with? You can see it in the picture. It's not conforming with the setback. Because the setback in that zone R2, you're required to have at least 10 feet on the side. That clearly is inside 10 feet, but that's the way it was when it was brought into the village. So to me, when I read 9.2.23C and it says you can have enlargements, additions, alterations, so long as it doesn't increase the degree of nonconformity, what it's talking about is the way that the building doesn't conform. So it's not going to increase the degree of nonconformity in that it's not going further into the setback area. It's not adding an extension onto the back of the building. It's just popping out that corner under an existing roof line and on the slab that exists. And so that's I guess the first argument for the commission is that the easiest way, I think, for the commission to decide this is actually just to say you don't need a variance at all, because this proposal meets what is actually set out in 9.2.23. If the commission looks at 9.2.25 variances, it's going to see language right in front that says this section is for when you're varying from the terms of Chapter 9. So when you're doing something different from Chapter 9, for instance, your April hearing, you had a woman in here proposing to build a guest house inside of the setback for a ditch. The setback for a ditch is something like 25 feet. What she was asking was permission to go to 15 feet. So that's not allowed under Chapter 9, and you could go through the variance process and say, even though the terms don't allow you to do that, we're gonna allow you to do that because of the extenuating circumstances. Here you don't need to do that because 9.2.23 allows you to make that call as long as you're finding that it doesn't increase the degree of nonconformity. The second way you could do, you could approve is there's an exemption. If you go further down in 9.2.23, that's subsection E, it talks about exemptions for enlargements, additions, or alterations that do increase the degree of nonconformity. And there the standard, and this is in the report, is that that's fine. The commission can allow it so long as it doesn't adversely affect surrounding properties and resources. And so for that reason, what you also now have in front of you that you didn't before is a letter that is signed by the neighbor to the east who's the neighbor closest to this remodel. And also, since then, 4, I think, other neighbors, you have this in your packet, have also signed on. Everybody that Mr. Mosier could find in the neighborhood and asked said, we're happy that you're working on the place. We want it to look nice. Building out that corner doesn't bother us. And the commission has that in front of it. Let me make sure I covered all the factual differences. Darnell, could you just show the second photo? Thank you, sir. This is a little better depiction of the slab that's there. And so with respect to the deck, again, it's just to raise the deck level to the same level as you would walk out of the house. So it's something like a foot above the concrete slab that is proposed to be wood material instead of a concrete slab. I think that's everything for now. I wanted to come back around after Mr. Mosier makes a statement to answer any questions that the commission has, but if that's all right, I'd like to invite Mr. Mosier to come up and make a statement.
Mr. Mosher?
Sir.
Commissioners, my name is John Moser, and I'm the owner of 415 Pueblo Solano Road. I am originally from Sweden, but since last year, I'm a proud American citizen. And my son, thank you. My son, Ezequiel, and his mother grew up in the village down the street from 415 Pueblo Solano Road. And I've been coming here for over 10 years now, enjoying the tranquility and beauty that the village has to offer. I work in the medical technology industry, specializing in remote monitoring of implantable cardiac devices, which requires me to travel quite a lot. And having a property in the village has always been a dream of mine. And when I saw this property for sale, I decided to take the step and become a property owner in the village. And I saw that this property needed a lot of work, but I also saw the potential for making it beautiful again. And I dreamed of irrigating the property, walking the ditch with my son, teaching him the value of water, creating beauty around us by doing so, and I wanted to be close to family, and this was the perfect property for all those reasons. I'm dreaming of transforming this house into a beautiful space, like Chris said, with big glass doors opening into the backyard, and I plan to plant hundreds of bushes, plants, fruit trees. I want to enjoy this space, while at the same time helping the neighbors by transforming an old eyesore into a lush and shining property, hence raising everyone's property value in the vicinity. I'm installing a state-of-the-art watering system. I'm spending close to $50,000 on yard improvements, and this property will look stellar once I'm done with my plans. And so far, I've hired an architect, designer, contractors, builders, and I filed for a permit as, I don't know if Chris mentioned, that was 1027 in October of last year. And I worked with the planning and zoning director, and as Chris also mentioned, I couldn't attend the first meeting because I was out of the country. And I didn't realize that my contractor wasn't going to be prepared for standing in front of you guys. And so I brought on heavier artillery this time, and I'm hoping that you guys will allow me to proceed with my plans and to allow my dream to come to fruition. Thank you.
So the last thing I'll mention, I gave the commission 2 ways to approve. The third is the way that the Planning and Zoning staff has recommended, and former Director Rubin. She recommended, and I think Mr. Williams is with some modifications standing by that recommendation, to recommend approval, but through both 9.2.23, the grandfathering in section, and 9.2.25. That's the variance. And so I just wanted to cover briefly 9.2.25 so that the record is full should the commission want to vote that way, that there will be enough evidence on each of the factors under the variance. So I just wanted to march through those just quickly. So I think it's E7 is that correct, Mr. Williams? 9.2.25 E7? Is it C7? E7. Okay. So E7 is the variance provision. And a variance can be granted if the following factors are met: in conformance with the goals and policies of the village master plan. And so if the commission looks at the 2035 master plan, there's a couple of provisions that I think assist in getting to approval. One is that Village Form Goal 2.1, which is under the chapter for historic preservation, says that the goal is to preserve and enhance the historic and valley character. Under that section, Policy B, there's a mention of preserving historical styles and buildings. And there's also a mention of setback requirements. And there's some discussion of that in the 2035 master plan, recognizing that some of the properties were cut up in a way to be very close to property lines, as you can see in the photo. But also appreciating that that's part of the history of the valley, that tripas were split between families, and we ended up with some pretty narrow lots. 7.1 talks about historical preservation goal, one of the objectives being 7.1.1, preserve historic structures and buildings. This building, as I mentioned, was built in 1934. It's I think, in line with that goal that Mr. Mosier, instead of demolishing this and building some monstrosity in the middle of the property, is just trying to rehab what is a cool old building. It's 90 years old. And I also think that building practice is also more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, which is also a goal in the 2035 master plan. That's under 4.7 sustainable development goal, where the village says our goal is to encourage and integrate into village residential development, sustainable and low impact infrastructure and development. This is far less impactful than demolishing this and then hauling a bunch of materials and creating something new. Preserving this old structure with just some modifications will be more environmentally friendly. And then there's also the multi-generational provisions that the 2035 plan has throughout, which I think is to encourage and sustain the village through inviting young families. Mr. Mosier has a son who's about 9 now, and he's gonna raise him up here. The village is expensive, and so I think young families look for distressed properties that they can invest in because it's something they could actually afford, and then they're gonna, hopefully update and make it better than it was. And so 1.2 overall village goals has some mention of a multi-generational village. 1.2.4, sustain the village as a multi-generational community, which makes sense for many reasons. But I think that's also something that this proposal is in line with. So going back to the variance after covering the master plan. Find it here. Okay. So 2, it is not contrary to the public interest in protecting and fostering the character of the vicinity and the village. Really, if you drive down Pueblo Solano, you can't really see this back corner, but what he's gonna do with the property is definitely in the interest of the neighborhood. And the evidence of that is that every neighbor he found close by there, including this one that's just to the east, supports this proposal. And won't cause material adverse impacts on adjacent property, the neighborhood, or the community. And that also is expressed in the letter. And you can see, I think now from the picture, much more clearly what's being proposed and how minimal this is. And so it'd be inconceivable that this would have an adverse impact. And then there's also, if you get through the variance criteria, you also have to get to the third factor, which goes into hardship criteria. And I think this is what Mr. Williams was talking about, is really the hardship here ties back into 9.2.23, because this is a very old building that no longer conforms with the code. Somebody who buys it has to deal with that. That's the hardship in doing any alteration or enlargement or extension to it. You're necessarily gonna be in that setback zone. But here, there's no further intrusion into the setback zone, and for that reason, we think this is appropriate. And that's it. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Commissioners, are there any questions?
I have a couple. The first one is, when you talk about building it to the overhang, okay? Are you talking about that the building itself is going to continue with what is existing there and the overhang is going to be consistent with what the overhang is, or the overhang is where the building is going to? First question.
That's a good question, and I'm sorry that I didn't explain this better, but
I'm talking about the outside, your outside wall, which is closest to the fence. It has probably, what, a 2-foot overhang?
Correct.
When you talk about that the structure is going to be inclusive of the overhang, is the wall itself going to be existing to what's existing, or is it moving it out to the overhang? Because I'm hearing
yes,
overhang
yes.
as being the area that's considered, where the area that's considered should be 2 feet back from the overhang where the existing wall should be.
No, he doesn't plan to go all the way to the
Okay.
overhang. He plans to just extend that wall to the corner, and then on the backside, just flush with the wall as it exists.
It goes with the wall, not the overhang.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
That was my first question. My second question goes to what we have been hearing from the trustees, going back to you, going back to 9.23. And it sounds like what I'm hearing here is that this falls into where we probably don't even need a variance because of 9.23. Is that correct, Mr. Williams?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Martinez, kind of.
And that's what we need to know, because if that's the case, I don't think that we even need to be working on a variance because it falls within the 9.23. And how do we get to who in the planning and zoning department, which is your department, can give us that? Because if that's the truth, we don't even need to be looking at a variance. It falls within what is considered to be part of 9.23.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Martinez, yes, I would agree with you to your point or your inference that it's confusing, because it is. The former director consulted quite a bit with Mr. Houghton and Mr. Mosier. She and I discussed the code and what the nonconformance sections mean in relation to the variance criteria. And in a nutshell, it was determined that there is no specified process specific to nonconformance, but it did mirror the variance procedures very closely. And so that's why the recommendation has been changed from the initial staff report and the initial glance, if you will, at the proposal, initial analysis of the proposal, to now include this additional information, which the department feels better meets the intent, not only of the criteria of the variance, specifically to 9.2.25 E7B, which is, that's the subsection dealing with unnecessary hardship, but B5. And if I can, Madam Chair, just read this very quickly. Variances can be approved, the unnecessary hardship standard can be met if there are other relevant factors which exist, when taken into account, indicate the granting of the variance is substantially justifiable given proper weight of the interests of the property owner, the public interest in protecting and fostering the character of the vicinity and the village, and the intent and the purpose of the master plan and zoning code are achieved. I don't want to put words in Mr. Houghton's mouth, but staff has concluded that the purposes of the village and those of the master plan, specific to the comp plan, the master plan and the zoning code, are achieved through the granting of the variance. They're continuing essentially the wall and the overhang, and that meets the compelling interest of the village. So we can include things like how the neighbors are affected. Are they in support of the matter? as part of a decision or a part of the recommendation that we make, which we provide to you, if that helps. I can clarify if not.
Well, for us, it's a very strange situation, because when we make a recommendation for, we're gonna have to follow this trail of subject A, and the reason for my point is, if this is something that shouldn't even have a variance, that would save everything from happening, because we don't need a variance, and the ability to pass it on its own merit. And again, we're talking about differently this and then the deck, which is another subject matter. But that's my point, is that if staff feels that this is a subject property that falls within, it does not need a variance, I think that's something that we could feel very comfortable of saying, we'd rather go down that rabbit hole than the other one of subheading. See what I'm saying and where I'm going to?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Martinez, understood. This is, as I mentioned, something confusing, wonky for staff. But we believe, A, that a variance is necessary.
Okay, that's
And
the first
B,
thing.
that the nonconformance provisions of the zoning code, which talk about essentially those issues that Mr. Houghton mentioned, the lawful use of buildings at the time of the application of the zoning code became effective, which did not conform to development regulations. So this house was built so long ago, it was in existence before we had zoning in the village. That it may be continued, provided that any enlargements or additions or alterations to the building will not increase its degree of nonconformity and will conform in every respect with the development regulations of the zone. So the purposes of the village, staff believes, and our recommendation is to approve the variance because this proposal meets not only the goals of the master plan, but the intent of the zoning code. And when you compile or when you consider those standards with the evidence that's been presented since this matter was at the Board of Trustees, again, staff recommends that the commission, based on the findings that are in the staff report with those modifications that I made, approve the request.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chappell, is there anything you would like to add in clarification, or are you good with what has been said?
Madam Chair and the commissioners, as I understand it, I got in a little late, but I was here for the last presentation. I concur. I think one of the problems is that when you start wanting to do things like acknowledge the non-conforming use is not being extended or not being increased, there are only a few ways and few things in the ordinance as to how you file applications. And there is one for a variance, but there's not a specific one as to how you deal with the non-conforming uses. So the staff chose to deal with it as a variance, but use the non-conforming use and not increasing the non-conformity in lieu of really what is otherwise a hardship that is required under the variance one. And because I think the problem before was the inability to, quote, show hardship with those elements. And so that satisfies that provision and allows it to come under a standardized procedure that's in the code.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I have a comment and then a point of order. Okay, the comment is thank you for presenting a very clear and easily understandable offer here.
You're welcome.
Mr. Houghton and Mr. Mosher, both of you, thank you. My point of order is this. I'm certainly inclined to grant this, but hearing Commissioner Homan that she wants everything read in 2 minutes, I wouldn't know where to start to make a motion because I don't know how to word it.
And I agree with you.
I do have a question.
That's my point of order, and I guess it's to Mr. Williams or Mr. Chappell, I don't know who.
We have a little bit we still need the rest of the commissioners, as well as hearing any.
Yes, I understand
Oh,
that,
okay,
but I'm
thank you.
just No, I understand that there's still those who want to comment, but the point of order is, how do we word this, one way or the other? My one way will be for, but I haven't any way to say it. Okay, the point of order is get it right.
Commissioner Baldwin?
Thank you. And my apologies, I know this is clunky, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate virtually, given my work has me out of state. My question for Mr. Houghton is, there is an addition, right, that is being proposed as a part of this project, correct?
There is a plan to build out that corner. So,
Right. And what you had described is that it's not a 105 square foot utility room addition. It's more like 40 or 44 feet when you square out that corner,
yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Is it going to be heated?
Yes.
Thank you. So in fact, it is increasing the amount of heated floor area within the required setback. It's bouncing into that wall. It may be a lot less, but it still is heated floor area, which is what we have to apply in terms of the code. Now, that said, I'll cut to the chase so there's no suspense. I actually also support this moving forward. But I do so because specifically the non-conforming uses and structure exemption is included now. And I really appreciate the fact that you worked with your clients to find that piece, because it gives us a clear path. We don't have to twist ourselves into pretzels. It says specifically, and to get to my fellow commissioner's point, it says specifically, this is under E, non-conforming uses and structure exemption. So it's saying this is what you cannot do or do. And it says, extension or enlargement of non-conforming uses or non-conforming structures and the construction of new non-conforming accessories and structures are prohibited. That's in the are prohibited section. Unless the Planning and Zoning Commission, that's us, this doesn't go back to staff, it doesn't go to anybody else, us, we find that such extension, enlargement, or new accessory structures will not adversely affect the surrounding properties and resources. Again, great that we now have letters that say this is not going to negatively impact and adversely affect the surrounding properties. This is the game. This is the game changer. This is what we didn't have before it. Nothing else in my mind has changed. I mean, I don't think, Mr. Houghton, that you have really provided, you've provided a good argument, good job, but I don't think that the facts are different. And the staff report says they have found that there is increased amount of heated floor area. I agree. So, but the claim too, that is everything. What we have in front of us is a path to say, yes, all things equal, we are empowered with providing a path to say, yes, let's do this. And that is the additional piece that the hardship criteria in the variance, number 5, requires. Are there other relevant factors which exist when taken into account, indicate that granting the variance is substantially justifiable? I would say this is. Yes, great. Now we have the two components that allow us to move forward within the existing processes, and that's terrific. So I don't want us to kind of complicate things. I agree, let's streamline it, but this is very specific. The non-conforming use pieces, our discretion to agree or disagree does not adversely affect the neighbors, and that component allows us to bless the hardship criteria that we really couldn't reasonably do last time. So that is both a statement and a set of questions. So thank you.
Commissioner Baldwin, I'm not going to argue with you. If there's a path that the commission can find to approval, we will be happy with it. And in part, the commission is trying to figure out a way to consistently apply 9.2.23, and that all makes sense what you just said, that if it is viewed that if you're increasing the heated area, which is true, that is true, we are increasing the heated area. I think the distinction was simply that you're not increasing further into the setback area. And so if that's the way the commission views it, then you're absolutely right that there is an unless in subsection E that says it's fine as long as it doesn't adversely affect the surrounding properties. And then, yes, and then I think you go to the hardship criteria, which is what Mr. Williams is suggesting.
Thank you. Are there any further questions at this time for Mr. Houghton? Hearing, seeing,
I want to go back to, in this, is the decking included in the variance, or that's a separate issue?
It's included, yes, sir.
Okay, so going back to it, and if you'll go back to the second picture that shows the whole back of it, which was the second picture of the porch and then the full back side of it. When you go to that picture and you.
Darnell, I don't know if you got that. I would put it up, but I'm not putting
Yeah.
it.
the
Thanks,
next
sir.
one.
Okay. Now, my question is what you're saying that you're doing, once you enclose, and it's basically enclosing heated area of what you have two walls, and whatever you do in the inside is a totally different story. But go back to the other one, please. When you look at that concrete that you're talking about right there, it's totally going to be replaced, not replaced, but added on with wood on a decking level?
Just if you look at the bottom of that door there,
Right.
where the ramp goes to.
Right.
So all that's gonna happen is on that slab, it will go no further into the setback area. It will go no further north either. It will go to the end of that slab. All that's being proposed is wood material to bring the slab up to the level so you could walk straight out the door. So it's not a huge deck structure.
Right.
It's maybe 12 inches of wood material on top of the existing concrete slab.
And again, where I'm going back to is, again, we have, two different directions of, 150 square feet and 500 square feet. And I'm just trying to get to reality over here.
Yes,
Okay, so the deck is not 500 square feet. The deck is, what would you say it would be?
I think that deck, because it extends to the west there, probably is about 500 square feet. But all that's in the setback area is
Okay.
that 5 feet by whatever that is, 20 feet.
So the variance that you guys are asking of us to give you is, there is 500 square feet of decking, but the doorway this way isn't a variance. The doorway this way is a variance coming back out.
Correct,
Okay, thank
correct. That little strip, and I hope this doesn't happen, but if the commission denied that part of the deck, he could build the deck as long as it didn't go in closer than 10 feet to that fence. And then it would just have to drop down
Right, I
to
agree.
concrete.
Okay.
But that's what's being proposed, that little strip be finished out with, 12 inches of wood on top of that slab.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for
That's
the
it for me.
question.
So there's no change in the footprint that already exists?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. We've got one person signed up, Mr. Montoya, you wanted to speak in support? If you will give your name and address, please.
Yes, David Montoya, and I live at 517 Pueblo Solano, 3 doors down. Thank you, commissioners. First of all, I want to thank you for your service. This is a tough job, and I really appreciate you doing this for this extreme high pay you're getting. And, but, I got to tell you that this is fairly tough. It's fairly intimidating for most people. And I know it's sophisticated and there's a lot to it, but you got to see, this is my son-in-law. I was really excited for him to want to buy this place because it had been, Mr. Whittemire had died years ago, and another person had bought it. He tried, but he also was handicapped, and he couldn't keep the place going like Whittemeyer's did. And when I moved there in '75, they were the greatest neighbors. And this place was not in the village. The village didn't extend to 4th Street until the mid-'90s. So this had nothing to do with the village. And the people there really took care of their properties, and we really encouraged, and all the neighbors are so excited when John came to get this place. Well, he bought it, and I just want you to recognize that there is some effects to all this. They bought it, they have payments, mortgage payments and all the things, everything has been stopped from the fall last year. And look at all the time that we've gone through. And I'm not blaming anyone, but it is challenging and expensive. And it just sat there. And the contractor, thankfully, that I know of, is still staying on board. But I just want you to recognize that while this is super important, try to look at for the people that we're trying to encourage to come into our village, that this is onerous. It's really challenging and tough and super expensive. And nobody is gonna say, hey, while you're dealing with the village and all the challenges, you don't have to pay the mortgage or the taxes or the bills. And so I just, that's my little point. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there anybody else wanting to speak in support? Anyone wanting to speak in opposition? Okay. With that, the input is closed for commission discussion and a motion.
How do we write the motion?
I think the discussion has to come into play where you guys are going to have to help us out. I think that we're all on the same board. I think what we just need to do is get the language that whoever would like to make the proposal will be in fact the correct language. If you can help us out, Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
I think you could just read this.
Madam Chair, if you want to take it, or you want me to?
No, I can, yeah, just go ahead.
Okay. I guess is this my correct formality? I move that we accept the recommendation to approve V 2308 with the following findings. 1, the Board of Trustees heard the appeal to V 2308 on March 19th, 2024, and remanded the application to the Planning and Zoning Commission with instruction to consider additional evidence and determine if the provisions of Section 9.2.23 non-conforming uses and structures raised for the first time on appeal were pertinent to the variance request. 2, the variance request sufficiently meets the requirements of Section 9.2.25E 7A 1 to 3, B 1 to 5, and C 1 through 6. Specifically, A, the variance is in conformance with the goals and policies of the village master plan. Policy A, action steps, states, quote, enforce village zoning and ordinance requirements, end quote. However, this application has been determined to meet the hardship criteria as required by the village code for the granting of a variance. Ref Section 9.2.25E 7A 1 and Section 2.25E 7A 3. 3, number 3. The variance request meets the requirements of Section 9.2.25E 7C 1 through 6. And the following conditions. The variance, number 1, the variance is for the construction of a 105 square foot utility room addition to an existing home and a 504 square foot deck 5 feet and a half inch from the side property line. 2, building permit approval is required prior to construction.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, this is a roll call. Go ahead.
I just want to say something.
Commissioner Edwards?
I just want to, I'm in favor of this, and I want to compliment the property owner for not giving up, but Excuse me. No, we have a lot of underground things that happen, and it takes courage to try and do it the right way because you do take a risk and somebody's going to say no. And I like when people are above board, and we need more of that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Barrow.
Yay.
Commissioner Martinez.
Yes.
Commissioner Edward.
Yes.
Commissioner Baldwin.
I'm sorry, I had hoped to make a few comments before voting, so I don't know if I can still do that.
Okay, go ahead. And then let us know what your vote is.
I will definitely do that. So first, I agree with Commissioner Edwards. I think it's one of the reasons why we talked about making sure that there's a lot of information distributed through the Village Vision and other things to give people sort of a layperson's helping hand in this process. I know it can be intimidating, and the goal is not to intimidate. The goal is to make sure that we are really living up to the code and the master plan of this village. I also think that it is really important to understand what was different and what wasn't different. We don't have to convince ourselves we made a bad decision to make a good decision today, because I think we made good decisions both times. We just have different information now, and it's complete. And so I do appreciate the patience, and I appreciate the statements, and I appreciate the family members coming, and I am confidently happy to vote aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Haywood?
Yes.
And Commissioner Homan, yes. That gives us a unanimous approval. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped right over you, Drew. I am so sorry. Commissioner
Yes,
Drew.
yes, yes, yes.
Now it's unanimous. Yes. Thank you. And thank you once again. I did before she did. Makes it, in case it didn't get picked up, I said yes as well. So, all right. This matter is closed, and thank you. We look forward to all those additions that you're putting in. Great. So let's go on to the next item. Let me get this up. Yeah, it's way down here. Hold on. I'm still trying to get to it. Gosh. Excuse me? Go ahead. Oh, here it is. Got it. Okay. I don't know. It's way down there. 61 out of 92. Okay, so our second item is CU 24-04, a request by Wayne Sears and Leah Black for conditional use approval as outlined in section 9.2.11 C1, reference section 9.2.7 C5 for a 975 square foot guest house. The property is located at 221 Green Valley Road Northwest here in Los Ranchos 87107 and is legally described as Lot 149 Zia Gardens subdivision. The property contains 0.59 acres more or less. Mr. Williams. Oh, yes, we need to swear people in. Thank you, Mr. Chappell.
Everyone that's going to speak on this item, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell all the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of law? Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you. The matter that comes before you, as Madam Chair described or introduced, is a request for conditional use approval for a guest house, commonly referred to as a casita or mother-in-law's quarters. As the Commission is aware, conditional uses are expected, anticipated uses within the Village Zoning Code, but because of their nature or aspects of the use, the Board of Trustees, when they amended the zoning code to add guest houses, determined that rather than being a permissive by right use, conditional uses required some sort of additional level of review generally associated with, again, aspects of the property that could be injurious to surrounding properties. Guest houses are allowed as a conditional use in all residential zones of the village. The code allows the planning department, the planning director, to review and approve these administratively if certain criterion are met. As is outlined in your staff report, there is a provision that indicates that if there is opposition to a conditional use request or a guest house, it does necessitate the matter coming before the Planning and Zoning Commission. It no longer leaves it as an administrative function, but necessitates a public hearing in front of the P&Z for their consideration. That's how this matter got to you. Madam Chair, as you described, this is a request for a 975 one-story guest house that will be placed or is proposed to be placed in the rear yard of the subject property. Specifically, they're looking to place it in the northwest corner of the lot. As required by the code, it will not have a garage, and it will meet the applicable side and rear yard setback distances in that northwest corner. This matter originally came to the Village Planning and Zoning Department at the end of April. We received an application again for the guest house. We processed it, which includes providing the applicant with a sign to be posted on the property, very similar to the requests that come before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we also sent a mail-out notice to registered property owners within 300 feet of the subject site, again, duplicating what we do at the Planning Commission level. A 15-day comment period is attached to that. It's included both within the mail-out notice and placed upon the sign, encouraging or letting people know, rather, that if they have opposition to the request, they need to file it with the village within that designated advertisement period. On May the 20th, which was during the advertising period pertinent to this particular request, the department did receive opposition to the request. And that is listed on, I apologize, attachment 3 of your staff report. The opposition that was received indicated that, and it's outlined in your staff report as well, but it was reported that there was an illegal eviction of the rightful property owners and that the current owner is claiming ownership without following the law. As part of the application process, one of the documents that the village requires before we will even accept and process an application is proof of ownership that was provided. After speaking with the applicant, it appears this has also been provided and included with your packet, but there was a foreclosure. They are the new owners, and apparently the former property owner has continued to attempt to file legal actions to reverse that or recoup the property. Based on the standards within the zoning code and the evidence that's been presented, staff wholeheartedly recommends that the opposition to this particular matter not be a weighted factor in this decision, and recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve this conditional use request, again, as it does meet all the applicable criteria. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Okay.
So basically, the rights of redemption were exhausted by this other person, and they didn't have any, and they were claiming that they had some, I guess. I read that in that court case, it said that the judge felt as though that this person was almost trying to act in a punitive way against the applicant.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I would agree with your sentiments, with your conclusions. Again, as staff looks at these types of proposals that come forward, as we bring them forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we're looking at the land use aspects of the request. Other factors are just not pertinent to the criteria.
That's fine.
In front of you.
Is the applicant present? If you'll come to the podium, introduce yourself with your address, please, and give us a description of what you're trying to do.
Sure. Hello, my name's Leah Black. I'm at 221 Green Valley Road Northwest. My partner and I, Wayne Sears, purchased this property back in August. And the goal is to, originally we were gonna build the casita for his father, but now it turns out I think his father wants to live in the front house and we wanna live in the back house. Anyway, so it's a beautiful property. We love it. We're there currently. We have faced a lot of, for lack of a better word, scary opposition from the previous tenant who went into foreclosure. It's been really dramatic. Anyway, that aside, we do have a really wonderful vision for the property, and it would be great to bring, sort of, the vision is to make it like a fun little farm compound and to have, he's essentially my father-in-law, though we're not married, to the house and have our dogs all together. We want to build a small casita with all the setbacks. We've worked with Mr. Williams, and just not encroaching. The lot would still be very big. We totally understand about not wanting infill in Los Ranchos. That's why we love it. It would be respectful of all of the setbacks, and it would still be a really large chunk of property without buildings all over it. I don't know if that summed it up enough, but that's what we're hoping.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Barrow?
Quick question.
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Barrow, Baldwin?
Thank you. So if I understand this, it is a 975 square foot casita that you're proposing?
Correct, Commissioner.
Thank you for being under 1,000 square feet.
We don't want a big house. Thank you.
Commissioner Barrow?
I have two questions. Who is the owner of this at the moment? And, okay.
Shall I answer? Thank you, Commissioner. Currently, I and my partner are the owners, Wayne Sears and Leah Black. We closed on it August 16th of 2023. So it's been almost a year. And the previous owners, I brought a bunch of paperwork to back this up, but the previous owners have been told by Judge Brickhouse to not bring this to court anymore. It's been continue to be refuted by the judge.
I saw that, thank you. Can you tell me, what does PennyMac Financial Services, it's a mortgage REIT, what do they have to do with it?
PennyMac Financial Services were the ones that put the previous owners into foreclosure. They hadn't paid the mortgage for years and years.
Okay.
So they originally were in a court case against them, and then we found it when it was in foreclosure and bought it from the bank.
I see. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there anyone else wanting to speak in favor of this application? Anyone willing or wanting to speak in opposition to this application? Okay. Public input is closed, and we will continue with the discussion of the commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Is there further discussion or a motion?
I just want to say that I like that they have an architect. They had a plan that looks nice. You're doing it above board. You like the agriculture and the vision, and I'm for it.
Is that a motion?
Yes, is that a motion?
Motion to, amateur hour. I would like to make a motion to approve CU 24-04.
Yeah.
That we approve CU 24-04 for a guest house of 975 square feet.
I'd like to second that motion. You guys are my neighbor on the other side. I have Grandpa's Community Garden, which is what we consider to be a beautiful area, that the ditch over there has a walking path that is just amazing. And so everything that they've proposed is an asset. So I, with happy heart, I second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Commissioner Baldwin?
that the motion includes with the staff report's findings and conditions.
Commissioner Edward? Will you accept that friendly motion?
Yes, that would be fine.
Commissioner Martinez, is a second, do you accept?
I do.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. So let's go through our roll call vote. Commissioner Barrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Martinez?
Yes.
Commissioner Edward?
Yes.
Commissioner Baldwin?
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Drew? Commissioner Haywood? And Commissioner Homan, yes. All right, that closes us out. You've been approved unanimously. Thank you. So now we have no old business, and we have no new business. Let's go on to the Planning Department reports.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, there is no Planning Department report, Planning and Zoning Department report this month.
All right.
May I have a question? Do we have a new staff member for it? For planning?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Barrow, my understanding is that an offer has been made. I don't know the details of that, but I do know that the administrator is working very diligently to fill the position of director.
Okay, thank you.
So now on to Commissioners' informal discussion. Let's kind of go backward. Commissioner Haywood, do you have anything?
Actually, I do. A neighbor of mine, in reference to the park at the corner of Osuna and Edgewood Drive, has voiced concern repeatedly to me that there is no park zone in the village that we could place that park under to protect it from development, because her understanding is that at the moment it's Zone C, commercial, and that even though infrastructure has been placed in the park, it's still vulnerable to future commercial development. So that I was just throwing that out in terms of a potential zone.
Mr. Williams, if you will put that on the agenda for next month. Thank you.
I like
Commissioner
that,
Edward?
by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Very thoughtful.
I thought we had a new zoning, the guy who, I can't even think of the title right now. I'm a little tired. Code Enforcement Officer. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, yes. Michael Montoya is a relatively new code enforcement officer. I believe he started, and she's ignoring me, 6 or so weeks ago. So yes, sir, he is relatively new. He fills the position that Thomas Sanchez used to be in.
I asked that question to make a point, and the point is that I find that our jobs are extremely difficult to do when zoning code enforcement does not get done.
Yep.
The failure of zoning code enforcement to do what they need to do makes what we do extremely difficult, because on one of the cases we had earlier this year, there was at least 5 houses that were in violation of what the people wanted to do. And, you know, either we're asleep at the wheel or we don't have enough people. We don't, you know, administratively require these guys to actually go out and get in their truck and drive around and see what's going on.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I mean, from an operational standpoint, the previous code enforcement officer served on a part-time basis. I have been working with the village, I believe, since September of last year. I don't recall a day when Mr. Sanchez, who was the code enforcement officer at the time, wasn't out in the field. Currently I'm in the office almost every day during the week now, and I can assure you that he's out for 2 to 3 hours a day. Complaints about zoning issues are investigated when they're brought to the attention of the village. Mm-hmm. When our code inspector is out and about in the field and he comes across something. But certainly there are situations where either a property has a variance, it may have been granted years ago, It may be that what the public perceives to be, say, a property line is not really a property line, it's a fence line, so setbacks wouldn't apply in that situation. Or quite frankly, we've got weekend warriors that want to build without a permit, and to your point, instead of doing the right thing and, follow the procedures that are established by the code, would rather come before the Planning and Zoning Commission in certain situations and ask for forgiveness rather than for permission from staff. All of that is to say, if there are specific concerns that you have, all we need is a street address, and we can have somebody go by and take a look at it. If additional information on the results of that inspection, or if we engage in an enforcement action, i.e. we try to get the property owner to do the right thing after the fact and bring the property into compliance, that may mean applying for a variance. That may mean moving a particular structure to meet, say, setback requirements, or coming in and getting a permit even though they didn't initially. Again, all we need is an address, but I can assure you there are folks there's a code enforcement officer that's out there 20, 25, 30 hours a week looking for and investigating complaints about zoning violations.
And I'm not hanging it on the prior gentleman, because some of this stuff has been going on for 30 years. And two other things. There was a site development plan on an alfalfa field that was done many years ago, which is now a Smith's grocery store, for which some of it is in the village and some of it's not in the village. And I shop there regularly. I work out there, not as much as I should. And if you drive around and you look to see how many trees were supposed to be planted, and when a site development plan gets approved, usually the landscaping plan is a part of that approval, there's like over 60 trees that should be at that property. And I find that that place is run like a slum. And I'll say that twice. I think it's run like a slum. They're all mostly cut down or dead. The grass doesn't often get mowed or anything. We have tried to call the city won't do a damn thing. We have tried to call the owner doesn't do a damn thing. I'd like to have the village flex its muscle and tell these guys to take care of their stuff, because it's the front door to our community and it's where probably 90% of our residents shop. I mean, it is disgusting.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Edwards, so I can certainly research, but to your knowledge, is the Smiths, is the property itself within the village limits, or it's just on the border of the village?
I believe part of it is, I believe the village limits cuts right through the middle of the building.
Okay. Madam Chair, Commissioner, I can certainly make a note and again, put it on.
But to the extent, does it meet some law? I mean, the Board of Trustees, they need to flex their muscle. They need to take a leadership role in making this place look nice. And they don't, and they haven't. It's the biggest commercial development that is kind of partially within the village, that affects the village, because in a commercial trade zone, you're not going to see another grocery store built within probably a 5-mile radius of that store. They control and own all of the potential future grocery stores ever to be built in the village. In the development, it's awful. It's a super, super low standard. They treat us like we're second-class citizens in our own state. And I don't like it. It needs to look nicer. And I know they can make it look nicer, because if you go to a Smith store at Paseo in Wyoming, you go to the one at Golf Course and Ellison, I think it is, McMahon. Those are nice. Nice places. I mean, you compare it to Atrisco Heritage Academy. Have you seen that campus? Granted, that's a school. I mean, that place is impeccable, which leads me to the next point. The APS schools within our village, again, they look awful. They don't aspire any degree of academic achievement or success. And I know that we have landscaping standards. I don't think they're being met.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I can certainly address that. Albuquerque Public Schools are are a political subdivision of the state of New Mexico. Village standards don't apply to those properties.
But you know what voices of political leaders do? And they need to start saying things and speaking out, because my kids go to those schools, and this is our community. And then the last thing is I'd like us to seriously reconsider the changing the rules and the laws under walls. I mean, we can't, everybody's not gonna have 5 acres, but it feels like 5 acres when you can see across people's front yards and you have a far line of eyesight. And I drive down Guadalupe now, and my new nickname for Guadalupe is Wallalupe. It's not the village. This, you know, people say that they need it for noise control. I gotta tell you what, it's not doing anything for noise except for causing, if they don't understand physics, the sound, when a sound is made, it bounces off of a hard surface and projects itself. And if you've been watching the planning and zoning hearings and the IDO ordinance and the comprehensive plan for the city of Albuquerque, they're having the exact same issues. It shows that crime is higher because people can hide behind walls. It doesn't create the positive hopefulness that people believe it does. And it changes the character of our community, where people feel walled in and walled out. And when you're driving down a road, it happens. Case in point, safety issues. A young girl who is dating my son gets in an automobile accident at the end of my street. There's a big wall there. It was never that high before. It screws up the line of sight for the driver coming down Guadalupe Trail or then right on Applewood Lane. And I think it creates way more problems than it solves. And I'd like to see that, you know, walls are limited to 3 feet in height. And if they want to put a fence up with some vines on it, then that might be okay. But to the extent that it's changing it, I think from an open space perspective that we've talked about and we've hammered on, I think that this is as damaging as cutting up the land in too small pieces, because it'll feel very small, very fast.
Commissioner Drew? Yeah, it is.
I'm going to go back to line of sight. There are so many roads that exit onto 4th Street that do not have clear line of sight. My road is one of them. I pull out of the road blind every day. I've called numerous times. And yeah, I know last year he was just overwhelmed. But he made an agreement with the landlord that it only had to be trimmed twice a year. What happens when the rain comes down? Those bushes grow double the size overnight. So I really think that an incorrect bargain was made with the landlord of that building to only trim his bushes twice a year. Thank you.
Commissioner Baldwin?
Thank you. Excuse me. You know, both commissioners are touching, I think, on that sort of, we have these ordinances, we have these codes. Are they being applied? What is the process for getting them trued up or changed? Like if they're not really what we want or need. I'm with you, Commissioner Tagliapietra, because I also complained about overgrown cactus at the corner of El Paraiso and 4th, and it literally was catching a landscaper for the site at one day and saying, please, I'm gonna get hit because nobody can see me and I can't see them trying to pull out onto 4th. And it was very great, and they did, and they've been on it ever since. And the challenge is, you know, we've only got 24 hours in a day and so many staff. And so I would say, is there a way that we can really work with staff to develop a work plan around some of these things so that we can actually prioritize what maybe should be coming in front of us or how things are going? so that we can be as efficient, as effective as possible and limit our one-offs.
Thank you. Commissioner Barrow? Commissioner Martinez?
There's a lot going on in the village, pro and con. There's a lot of statements that were made here tonight. There's a lot of need for work that needs to be done, should have been done, was supposed to have been done, et cetera, et cetera. The point is that we are a group of people that have this position. And what I hope that we get to a point of, because this is a brand new planning and zoning committee right here. Other than you two, we're all new kids on the block. But what I'm hearing is that I'm hearing a lot of commitments from you guys to be able to bring not only your neighbors, but the village's people's concern. That's one side of it. Now, the other side is you guys over there. And I think that what we need to do is find a comprehensive way to be able to have that ability to allow ourselves to make it an asset instead of a detriment. And I'll leave with the concept of what we all did, other than you. We went to that trustee meeting, and the issue of what was happening over there, of a situation that came in front of us, got to another place that it is way out of proportion. And I think what we have to understand too is planning and zoning is a set of rules and regulations. And when we look at rules and regulations, that is the asset of no different than the law. If you're breaking the law, there is subsequence to it. And I think that everything that we're doing, I think, and what I'm trying to say is I think that we are on the cusp of something good. I want to put an asset to what's happening here, because I think that what has been past tense is past tense. What's going to the future is something that this group right over here can be an asset in allowing us to make the village of Los Ranchos a blessed place that people want to come in. And like that gentleman said, they're not afraid to come in here because we are the green monsters. We just want to follow the rules. And if there's a way that you can show us, like you did tonight, and they showed us that they did, ability to bring it to us in a different way, that's awesome, because we're not here to try to pin the tail on any donkey. We're here to try to follow the rules and regulations that we also are part of putting together. So if we need to make changes, let's make changes. If we're ideas that we need to bring up, let's bring them up. But more importantly, let's do it with coherency. Because what we saw at the trustee meeting, last meeting, is incoherency. And it shouldn't be, because what we don't do is two wrongs don't make a right, right? So what we need to do is join together, and what we need to do is when that meeting comes to existence, when they go, I think that we need to go to that as a planning and zoning, because it came through us. Why we didn't catch or what the issues are, it might be important for us to learn, because when they come through us, we definitely need to catch it so they don't have to catch it. And just want to say you guys are doing, and I appreciate everybody's input. I think that we have some really coherency. It's not a one-sided, it's a good balance, and appreciate being here with you guys.
Thank you. You know, I really appreciate everybody's input and discussion. You know, even though we come, all of us, with different perspectives, different backgrounds, I know we all have the best interest of the village at heart. As many of you have stated, sometimes our decisions are very difficult and sometimes they're not very popular. And this can be a very, very tough position to be in. And as Mr. Montoya mentioned earlier, we get paid so much, that big goose egg. So, but you know, the issue is we're here with our hearts out, trying to do the best we can for our village. And I think anything that we can do to improve the process, to improve the rules, give our insight and input is really important. And above all, if we can see about healing some of the wounds that right now are being so wildly addressed at the trustee level, and bring us back as a village. So anyhow, I appreciate everybody, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Do we need a
I
motion?
move we
I'll make a
adjourn.
motion
Okay, second?
to retire.
Okay, so we are closing at 7:37, it looks like. Bye, Commissioner Baldwin. Thank you for joining us.